Welcome to the PFFUI podcast. On this month's episode, President Tony Murray recaps the IAFF Legislative Conference, gives an update on the 2023 Indiana General Assembly, and shares important information on the PFFUI State Convention. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the PFFUI podcast. My name is Eric Schoib, and with me as always is President Tony Murray. Hey Tony, how's it going today?
As always, it's going well. Eric, thank you.
March has been a busy month for the PFFUI. The executive board and members from across Indiana traveled to Washington, D.C. on March 6th and 7th for the IAFF Legislative Conference. Tony, what were some of the highlights?
Well, one of the highlights is we had 22 of our members from Indiana, from the PFFUI, in town at this annual conference, where we get together for 3 days to talk about our legislative priorities on Capitol Hill. And many people probably aren't aware that the IAFF has a government affairs office that is constantly working on Capitol Hill during the congressional session to advocate for bills that have to do with fire, EMS, rescue. And I was happy to join 22 of our own, very own from Indiana out to take part in this conference. And then probably the most important part of the conference is the opportunity to go up on Capitol Hill and meet with all of our members of Congress and U.S. senators to talk about these issues that have been outlined for us by the IAFF, and which they'll continue to work on long after we leave town.
So what were some of the issues that were laid out by the IAFF that we discussed on Capitol Hill with the Indiana congressional delegation?
Yeah, so there's a few of the bills that I'll just kind of go over here in brief. I won't take a lot of time. This is a new Congress. Meaning that, we just had elections in November, so the new Congress takes effect for 2 years, and so they're just getting organized and just getting going. So really all of these bills that I'm going to speak about are pending introduction, and we were in D.C. the second week of March. So a lot happens in a given week in Congress, so we'll keep tabs on this, but some of the issues are honoring our Fallen Heroes Act, which is an act that would potentially identify certain cancers as occupational. When our members die of these cancers, they would be eligible for the Public Safety Officer Death Benefit, which is a lump sum death benefit that is administered by the Department of Justice. And it is a federal program that we've had for a couple of decades now. Well, actually more than that, since 1976, actually. And the IAFF had a large part to do with that at the time. But that was first signed into law by then President Gerald Ford in 1976. But we've built upon this. And this is a one-time lump sum benefit for members that die in the line of duty to help support their family and loved ones after they're gone. And this is, just over $400,000 right now, but cancers are not covered under this. So work is underway to work through Congress to see that certain occupational cancers would be covered under the PSOB. I think a lot of our members are beginning to understand the critical nature of trying to rid PFAS, or toxic chemicals, forever chemicals, that are known carcinogens from our turnout gear. So we're working on a bill in Congress that's called the Next Generation Turnout Gear. And essentially, this would be the PFAS Alternatives Act, which would give federal funding for research development for gear that provides a level of protection that we enjoy now or greater, but without the without toxic chemicals such as PFAS chemicals that are causing our members a lot of health problems. The next piece of legislation looking at is health insurance for retirees. This is something that we talk about quite a lot among members around the state when I get out and about and on the road meeting in union halls and at union meetings. There is this challenge in our careers as firefighters to where our retirement is set up to retire with benefits at age 52, but we don't qualify for Medicare until age 65. And more and more, it is a challenge for our members to have provided to them any sort of paid portion of retiree health insurance. So this federal act seeks to provide tax credit to firefighters, EMS, law enforcement to offset the cost of purchasing health insurance after they retire and before that they're Medicare eligible. Another item that is on the agenda for the IAFF legislative book of work is free speech for public safety. And this is referred to as a Public Safety Free Speech Act. This, again, is also pending introduction into Congress. But the idea behind this is to provide for protections for our members' speech when they're speaking out on safety issues, wages, benefits, and even administrative requirements that are imposed on them on their job. So right now, unless you are a union official, most members are considered in the courts of ruled government employees. So they have First Amendment rights, but largely misunderstood or not understood well, is that there are certain limits to those rights when you're in a government employee. So this Public Safety Free Speech Act is pending introduction and would allow for some expansion of some of those free speech rights that public safety workers don't presently enjoy. On to firefighter and EMS collective bargaining rights. This is something that has been a matter that has been discussed and worked on in Congress for a number of years. The Public Safety Employer Cooperation Act of 2023 is pending introduction and really largely sort of regroups this topic to approach collective bargaining rights on a state-by-state basis. Essentially, as I'm understanding it, it would create an environment federally where states can have an easier path to create rights for firefighters and EMS to collective bargain or collectively bargain a contract, or at least have those discussions. In Indiana, we've worked on this really for a number of years, and in 2007, many of our listeners there could probably recall me saying or referring to the meet and confer law that was established in by the Indiana General Assembly and signed into law by then Governor Mitch Daniels in 2007, provided for basic rights to contract and a path to get there for our local unions in Indiana, so long as they met a certain population requirement. So we have been working towards that. In Indiana, I would say I would put up that piece of legislation and what we're currently operating under, which we've recently expanded, as a good example of how states who have been challenged by not having collective bargaining rights could maybe step into this a little bit in an effective way. A couple things, too, that are sort of in addition to these primary topics of congressional legislative action, I just cover briefly the reauthorization of the AFG and SAFER grant programs. These are grant programs that have been really beneficial to our members across Indiana, even in most recently for the 2022 award period, Noblesville Fire Department receiving a grant to fund 15 firefighters to better establish their ability to meet the NFPA 1710 standard on staffing and deployment. So that was upwards of $4 million, and these are very beneficial programs. AFG, of course, for equipment and programs. SAFER would be for the staffing piece, the actual firefighters. Another issue that the IAFF is addressing, and we hope to address very soon and get some progress on, is repealing the windfall elimination provision, otherwise known as WEP, W-E-P. Many, close to probably 75% of our members across the United States do not participate or forbidden from participating in Social Security, so they don't necessarily have a benefit from their primary fire job, but may participate in Social Security in a secondary employment. What the WEP did back when it was signed in the mid-'80s was creates an environment where a member that does not participate in their primary job in Social Security, but is paying into Social Security in other employment or previous employment or post-employment from the fire service, they suffer a reduction, an automatic reduction of their Social Security benefits. So we're trying to work on creating a better system to where if you pay into the system, no matter what your position is as a firefighter in your primary employment, that you don't get the reduction automatically as it stands today. And then doing some work on reducing the FLSA work period. We know that there's a variety of different platforms that an employer can establish, whether that's a 7-day, 14-day, 21 or 28-day FLSA work cycle. And with those come a specific provision of when do you start earning overtime, and that's requires many more hours than the standard employee or the 40-hour work employee. So we're looking to evaluate those. The FLSA laws have been around now for several decades, and it's time to take a look at those to see, is this making sense? Can there be an adjustment? Maybe lower the threshold by which we qualify as firefighters for time and a half. A couple of mental health pieces. The federal funding for firefighter peer support programs is a topic that is we're looking at in Congress and really sort of related to Indiana. Senator Todd Young, who's a United States Senator from Indiana, and his counterpart in the Senate, Chuck Grassley, recently got a unanimous concurrence through the Senate, creating the Fighting Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder program, which would establish mental health programs for U.S. first responders. So we're tracking that through, and that's in committee. So that's really the work that was done, and having the opportunity, I think, for our members to sit down and talk face-to-face with members of Congress, whether that be in the House or our Senate folks, is I think it teaches a lot of skills, especially people that deal with their city councils, mayors, fire chiefs, brings a particular perspective and an experience that they can take home. But it also is most important because, lobbying, which is what we do, lobbying at the very basic grassroots effort is the most effective type of lobbying, I think. So it enables some good discussions. We really appreciate having the members of Congress that we met with, that they took time to speak with us and found it important that we didn't meet with everybody, but we had appointments with all 9 members.
Right. And I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to mention our scholarship recipients from Batesville Local 5380. They were there representing their 9 members in front of the Indiana congressional delegation. Tony, I'm not sure if you'd like to talk about the scholarship program briefly.
Yeah, so the scholarship program, and in addition to Batesville, we had Lafayette were our scholarship recipients. So many years ago, the executive board made the determination to utilize the IAFF Legislative Conference as an opportunity to create a little more education and experience. It tends to be expensive, especially for smaller locals, because Washington, D.C. is an expensive town and requires some travel. The purpose of this was to get people that wouldn't otherwise be able to make this trip to get out and experience this. And I think that it's really proven to be a great program. The PFFUI provides transportation, registration, and all really that the recipient from the local needs to do is secure their time off from work to go out and travel. So this year we offer that to three. So two members from one of our newest locals, Batesville, and then President Trent Richter from Lafayette. So I think it was a great experience. We got great feedback from him, and I think they will offer a report at the convention.
Wonderful. Now as we transition from our nation's capital to our state capital, we are past the halfway point of the 2023 General Assembly. Tony, where are we in terms of legislation that the PFFUI is tracking?
Yeah, so this week was a really busy week. So when we get to the second half, anything that survived, any bill that survived the committee process, and then any floor amendments in the Chamber of Origin, and then subsequently passed that Chamber of Origin through a full chamber vote, moves on to the next cycle, and the cycle repeats. So that repeat process started here about 3 weeks ago after the midpoint. This is a long session, so as we previously mentioned, there are this is the budget, the biennial budget session. So Indiana creates its 2-year budget during this particular session. Many of our legislative priorities have already received committee hearings in the second half of the session, and all of our priorities actually made it through the first half. So we're really happy about that. We'll have more of a detailed report as we begin to see how things will wrap up. But I will tell you, this week we had our first bill of the session make it through both chambers and passed out of the General Assembly, and that was House Bill 1025, authored by Representative Jerry Torr, that puts our firefighters in fire territories and fire districts into the existing state statutes for disciplinary procedures. So that is a major feat. We appreciate the bill author and our Senate sponsors, and it's on its way to the governor.
That is great news. So what can we expect in the next couple weeks as the session comes to an end here in April?
Well, it's going to be the next couple of weeks, and like you said, Eric, yeah, the session is must close, as we call it, the Latin term sine die, has to happen by the last day of April. There's rumor out there, when you're in the hallways, like Mike and I and Tom, you talk to our fellow people in the lobby, known as lobbyists, and, it's kind of a close-knit club. We're talking, there's a rumor that the session may sine die a little bit early because there's a couple things coming to town. There's a big conference, one, I think, right before the really big one, and that's the FDIC coming to Indianapolis. So rooms, restaurants, seats become scarce. So I think that's on the radar of the General Assembly. And if they can get it done, why not save Indiana taxpayers a couple of bucks and get out of the session early. But beyond what to expect, I would say that we will have a full report. It's going to be rapid fire. And I think hopefully listeners are taking advantage of our efforts on our social platforms to sort of witness almost live when we are able to move bills that we're following or testifying for or against, and our legislative priorities. We're providing updates almost live on social media. So hopefully folks are taking advantage of that. And that's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter would be where you can find those. So I think that things are going to sort of be very rapid here coming up soon in terms of as we wind down to the final sine die.
Great. So as the session will come to an end, we are just going to become that much busier because we have the 47th annual convention of the Professional Firefighters Union of Indiana in Terre Haute on May 24th, 25th, and 26th. So, Tony, maybe you can give us a preview about what to expect here in Terre Haute.
Well, I know that the brothers and sisters in Terre Haute, Local 758, have been working very hard the last 2 years, and I know that they're going to put on a great convention for us. You know, that the right downtown Terre Haute is the new Terre Haute Convention Center, which I'll remind our listeners that it was the PFFUI that actually inked the first event at that convention center while it was still under construction. Back a couple of years ago. So we really look forward to being there. I know that President Bob Malone and his team have really focused on making this the best PFFUI convention yet, which seems to always now be the competition, is make it better than the last. But we're going to be in Terre Haute on May 24th through 26th. This is important for locals that are listening. It's really important for locals to send their delegates and be represented. We're going to have a really robust discussion on the direction of the PFFUI. You know, this is my first convention that I'll be at the head of the convention, holding the gavel, and we're going to have some robust conversations about our direction. We're going to entertain a variety of resolutions that we know are coming that will help us discuss and deal with our direction, and we'll act on those resolutions. So I really encourage all locals now, 84 locals, to be represented there. So a couple of items. One, if April 21st is a big date to remember for locals. So that's when the cutoff is for your hotel reservations. That's the cutoff for your registrations to be submitted to register your delegates. And that's the cutoff to file resolutions to be considered at the 47th convention. So again, the convention is May 24th to 26th in Terre Haute. April 21st is the cutoff to remember. And then Terre Haute's going to be hosting a golf outing on May 23rd. And I think that we'll be able to put the flyer up on the on this title page for the podcast. So if anybody wants to come out and play, maybe sponsor. And this is going to be at the Holman Links, I do believe, which is a really, as a non-golfer or a retired golfer, as I am, I understand this is a really nice golf course. Yeah,
it's a beautiful place to enjoy a May afternoon, and hopefully the weather will hold out, and it'll be a beautiful day in Terre Haute. So,
I think every day is beautiful in Terre Haute, is what I understand.
Yes, I would agree with that statement 100%. So, well, that will do it for the March episode of the PFFUI podcast.
Oh, before we go,
yeah.
Can I just say that, you know, we've done a couple of podcasts, and I've heard some feedback, mostly good.
Mostly good.
And one specific opinion was that this was a really nice podcast to listen to while you drift off to sleep. I think that I've heard that a couple of times.
Yes, I have actually heard that too. More specifically from our 5th District Vice President, J.C. Mitchell. So, J.C., wherever you are at right now, good night.
Sweet dreams, J.C. Sweet dreams.
And we will see you in the morning. Thank you all for listening to the March episode of the PFFUI podcast. Thank you for listening to the PFFUI podcast. For more information on news and upcoming events, visit us on social media or online at pffui.com. My name is Eric Schoib, and thank you for listening. We'll be back next month.